Okay, welcome everyone to our new season in the Belong in HE podcast. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's messaged me outside of the podcast, DM'd me, and just let me know how much the podcast is being useful in their day-to-day practice. So thank you so much. Today we've got a special edition. I'm joined with special guest Michael Talbot. He is Associate Professor in History with a focus on the Ottoman Empire. But more importantly, I guess, for this episode, he is a student success strategic lead, strategic project lead with a focus on personal tutoring and advising at the University of Greenwich. Thank you so much, Michael. Great to have you with us.
Thank you, Nathan. It's lovely to be here. And sorry about the mouthful of the titles. They sort of pack all the words in, don't they, on these sorts of
Yeah,
things?
I had to get project in there. Make sure that there's an end and start date somewhere. Yeah. Great stuff. So, look, I want to go straight into it. One of the reasons, I felt it was really important to have this episode is I'll be speaking at the UKAT National Conference that's taking place on the 8th of April, 2024. And I just thought it would be really good for people who are listening to understand a bit more about the work UKAT's doing and what it's trying to move forward, I guess, within the kind of European context. I know there's American partners.
Mm.
So tell us a bit more about UKAT as an organization.
So UCAT, UK Advising and Tutoring, is, as you say, it has its sort of roots in this American organization, the CADA, that
Mm.
does a similar thing across the pond. But really, the aim of UCAT is to give personal tutoring the recognition and the prestige and the professionalization that it deserves compared to other kinds of teaching. So, for a long time, and I'm sure many of your listeners who are involved in HE teaching will be very familiar with this, you didn't really get any training or explanation as to what personal tutoring or advising was. You became a teacher, you did your course materials, and then at the end of the day, you've got 30 plus undergraduates who you're then somehow responsible for, not just for their academics, but for their personal well-being and everything
Yeah,
else. So UCAT kind of exists to make that all make sense and to give it structures and values and scholarship that allow tutors, number one, to do the best job they can, number two, for tutees to get the best experience they can, and more importantly, for number three, for personal tutoring to be considered as a branch of pedagogy, that it
mm,
links in with the kind of teaching we do in the classroom. This is just a different form of it that exists outside.
yeah,
So over the years that UCAT's, I mean, I've been involved with UCAT now for I think four years or so. One of the things it's really trying to do is to give personal tutoring the same recognition as, for example, teaching. So when I started teaching a million years ago, no one had any teaching qualifications really in HE. Like advanced E was just sort of not really a thing then. Now, for example, at Greenwich, nearly 70% of our teaching staff have professional recognition through advanced HE. And the UCAT professional recognition scheme aims to do the same thing for personal tutoring. If you're
right.
involved in tutoring, you get the opportunity to demonstrate your good practice through professional recognition. And more importantly, we have a community of practitioners who share good practice and so forth.
Yeah, yeah. I just think it's so needed because when I say I stumbled into higher education, by happenstance, but
Mm,
one of the areas that I stumbled in first was academic advising. And then I, started lecturing thereafter. And I think, academic advising really is the one space where you can really understand the learner
yeah.
and the variations and the differences that learners bring, to the conversation. I just think it's probably one of the spaces that you're right, it does need to be professionalized because it often does get ignored as a mainstay of the academic experience. So my question on that then is, with all the conversations happening in higher education at the moment, educational inequity, we're talking about social justice, we're talking about, different learners, widening access, and even now AI, which we're probably all going to get sick of
Yeah,
hearing about.
absolutely.
What role do you think personal academic tutoring or academic advising now has to play in this kind of new contemporary format of higher education?
It absolutely has to be at the center. I mean, assuming that HE is not going to change radically in the next few years or even decades, we have very high student numbers. And so the learning experience for many students is becoming increasingly unpersonalized. So it's not like you're sitting like you imagine in the films or in TV shows where you get lots of one-to-one time with your lecturers, very small classes for discussion. A lot of students, their experience is massive lecture halls, big
Mm,
seminar groups, and they just sort of feel lost in the system.
right.
And so personal tutoring or academic advising, that's where the learning can then become personalized. And it's where students who might feel lost in the system can find someone who can support them. And this, I think, is absolutely crucial. As our student demographics change to reflect more of the society in which we live, there are going to be more and more students who don't have a long tradition of their parents, grandparents, ancestors going to university or even doing A levels. So we assume, I think our model still assumes that they know what university is about and what's expected of them. And increasingly, that's not the case. So to have someone who's an academic expert who can be there to check in on them, make sure they're doing all right, to see what extra support they need, and just be someone that they can sound out their concerns to, that is a really important role within HE. But at the same time, that's also a huge pressure on the academic tutor or personal tutor to basically have a kind of a playbook for any conceivable situation. Our
Right.
students are so diverse and have such diverse issues and problems and whatever they might have in their lives. At the moment, it's kind of like we're expected to deal with everything,
Yeah.
like academic skills to mental health to cultural integration, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So it's finding a way that we have that personalized level of personal tutoring, but not in a way that universities put all the burden of everything onto that one individual.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
I mean, when you were being an advisor, how did you feel? Like when you were advising, what kinds of issues were your students coming to you with?
You know what? To be honest, it's such a it's such an interesting role, right? And I think this is another reason why you need that professionalism and that boundary setting. Because I was watching a documentary the other day. It was about the history of nursing, and there was this person. I can't remember what they were called. Either they were called a locum or something. But their job was to take all the details when patients came in and just understand their life a little bit. They didn't have any medical training, but they were just there to organize things. And that role became what we now know as social workers, right?
Right.
And it became professionalized and so forth. And I feel like when I first started advising, yes, it was very academic, but very quickly I realized a student's life isn't separated from their
No.
learning life, right? Or their learning identity. And so I had to, yeah, straight away understand the learning identity, understand what's going on in their life, and try and balance the two. But at the same time, like you said, I've had to go through a deluge of training. I'm
Mhm.
talking mental health first aid, safeguarding, all the rest of it, just to make sure I'm delivering a service that is not just, good for them, but protects everyone else as well. So
Yeah,
it is a profession.
it is.
Interesting enough.
And there's an argument, right? So there's huge debate within higher education, and particularly around personal tutoring, about whether it should become a professionalized role, where maybe it's too much for
Right.
academics. And, most of us didn't come into this profession to become personal tutors. It just comes along with the job.
Yeah.
Should it be professionalized? And the studies show, though, that for the most part, students want someone that they know and who's a subject expert. They don't want it to be just a sort of we're going to go when there's a crisis. So
Right.
what good personal tutoring and academic advising can do, if it's well structured, is you see your student often enough that you pick up the signs and the issues thanks to the mental health first training or whatever else it is you
Yeah.
have to catch things before they get out of hand. I think at the
Right.
moment, because of student numbers and the lack of training, it is much more like an emergency service that students
Yeah.
come to when there's a crisis.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas ideally, we want it to be something that we pick up sooner rather than later.
I think that's huge. I think that's huge. And I can't remember, a few weeks back, I put a post out on LinkedIn and I was talking about, I just came to this epiphany that actually we won't need lecture theatres in the same way that we've been using them because of AI and the technological
Mm.
advancements. And I think I'll give it about 5 years and we'll see the lecture hall used very differently. But one thing that I put forward in that post is the one thing that higher education will always be here in some form or another. It's the signaling effect. Employers need to have some kind of barometer of, who's right for a job role. So, but in all of that, I realized AI adoption we're not going to see the replacement of the lecturer or the actual staff because people need human
Yeah,
connection, right?
yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
especially when you're feeling vulnerable, you know, at a point, you want someone to empathize with you. It's the reason why when we get onto a call, we're trying to call our bank or something, and you know, we just talk to the automated machine because we have to. And I don't know about you, but I just blurt out what I want, and I
Yes.
know it's not going to get it.
You can but try, but it is exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And lots of universities, for very good reason, usually resourcing, set up digital centers and online check-in things. And yeah, some students might use it, but they're still going to go to their personal tutor and get a human perspective on it first. And that links very much into AI. Yeah, there's ways that we can think about whether lectures are still a useful way of teaching or
Mhm.
anything like that, but they're never going to replace us, hopefully,
Right.
fully. And partly that's also to do with the fact that students want in-person contact. I think there's still some residual reliance on online stuff from the pandemic, and that has its uses. And for commuter students or distance learners or students with problems, there's nothing wrong with doing stuff on Zoom or on Teams
Yeah.
from time to time. But students want that; they want to see someone. They want to see someone in 3D. So until they can combine the AI with holograms, then we're really screwed. But I think we're okay for now.
AI avatars. Yeah,
Oh
no,
my days.
absolutely. So, okay, so we've talked a bit about UCAT, the professionalization of, you know, personal tutoring or academic advising in and of itself. I think it's hugely important, and I guess it will only really, well, I feel like it will be cemented once there is a standalone role, maybe linked with it, or something that's just given a bit more FTE
Yeah,
hours.
I think that's it. I mean, but also getting the FTE hours and then it meaning something afterwards.
Mm,
So I could teach a load of classes, and then when I go for my promotion, I can evidence that within my promotion applications. But how many universities have good personal tutoring as a marker of esteem for promotion or for other kinds of reward?
yeah.
One of the things that my university did, which was really nice, was in our student-led teaching award,
Mm,
which the Students' Union organised. They brought in a category for personal tutor of the year. So the students recognised it as something important well before the main
amazing.
university did.
Yeah.
So I think it's that the FTE is important, and recognizing just how much time good personal tutoring takes, especially with large numbers of students, is crucial. But then what happens after that? How does your university recognize and reward you for doing good? And that's partly what UCAT is there for, that
Mm,
once you've got once you put in your portfolio for professional recognition, you get some letters after your name, you get some prestige within the discipline, you can publish your work. So I think that is really important to go alongside the workload recognition.
awesome. So I was going to ask you just a bit about the conference that's coming up, some details in case anyone wants to come along. I've got the website somewhere here. There are so many talks. It's actually taken over 2 days.
Yeah, it's huge. I think it's the biggest one that they've done so far. So it's being organised at the University of Greenwich, and I've been really lucky that we bid for it and we got awarded it. And what we want, it's not just me, it's a whole committee of us organising this, was for this conference to do something. So
Mhm.
very often you have conferences and they're really interesting and there's lots of interesting papers and maybe you get a publication out of it, but that's it. Then you move on to the next thing. But we
Right.
wanted this to be a chance to stop and not only reflect on what is going on in personal tutoring in the sector, but more importantly, to think on how to take it forward.
Mm,
So we came up with these five. The theme is basically personal tutoring in the spotlight, making personal tutor at the center of student success and not just some peripheral
right.
thing. And so we came up with five categories that we thought would best show not just what's going on, but what we could do better. So the
Mhm.
first one and the most important one was about student voices. We talk a lot about personal tutoring as academics, but it's still relatively rare to have co-authored publications with students. We
Mhm.
have student surveys, but then it's us who write up the findings, not the students. So we wanted student voices to be really central in the conference.
Mhm.
Then the second spotlight was on collaboration. So as many people listening will know, within academia or within higher education, there's still this really strong arbitrary division between academics and professional services. And
Right.
they often don't have a lot of chances to talk to each other or to work together in a really clear way. So we wanted to showcase examples of collaborations between academics and professional services to deliver good personal tutoring and how we can make that better in future. We then want to think about the core skills that students can get from personal tutoring. We often just focus on the well-being aspect, on the sort of the
Mhm.
triaging element, whereas really good developmental personal tutoring is about helping students find their professional and personal development skills that we then support them
Right.
to work on. And then we've also got our professional development was the fourth spotlight. So how can we better improve the training for personal tutors across the sector? And then finally, bearing in mind where we are in our electoral calendar and things like that, advocacy. How do we advocate at policy levels, nationally, internationally, or locally, wherever it might be, for people to recognize, people in positions of management or power to recognize the importance of personal tutoring? So all of the papers that
Mm.
you will be hearing, including, of course, your contribution, will be speaking to one or more of these spotlights. I mean, what did you think when you were looking at the call for papers? Did it sort of
Yeah.
speak to you? Did it sort of make sense?
No, it was amazing to see the breadth of contributions, right? I'm looking now and it seems like one, two, three. In any kind of 1 hour moment, there's like nine
Yeah,
different workshops taking place,
yeah.
which is amazing. And I'm really looking forward. So, for those of you listening, I will be coming to speak specifically on racially inclusive advising and ways that can be enabled across teams as well. So no, it's looking great. So just if someone's thinking about coming, bringing a team, what does the conference look like logistics wise? It's on the Monday, the 8th of April.
And Tuesday, the 9th of April as well. It's 2 days. You can get 1 day tickets if you can only come down for one, or you can get the 2 day. And logistically, it's all in our main campus in Greenwich on this sort of UNESCO World Heritage Site, these beautiful Baroque buildings by Christopher Wren.
Mm.
It's a really stunning location. And as you say, we've got loads of parallel sessions. The highlight of the conference, well, there's many highlights of the conference, but one of the culminations of the conference is going to be we as a group, all of us participating, are going to come up with a manifesto, a co-written manifesto for the future of
Wow.
personal tutoring. I won't explain how it works, but it will work on the day. But yeah, the topics that we found and covered, the applications that we got for were just stunning in terms of their breadth and variety. And we've already got a whole bunch of students who've signed up to come both as speakers and as guests. So it's going to be a really genuine conversation
Awesome.
and chances to socialize as well as, the chance to sit and hear amazing papers.
No, I'm looking forward to it. I really am. I think I saw there was like a tour. I don't know if it was a maritime tour or
Yeah,
something like
that's right. Yeah, so one of my history colleagues is going to be taking on a guided tour of this amazing campus, and
that.
hopefully the weather will be all right. If not,
Yeah.
yeah, what can you do? What can you do? But yeah, it's
Absolutely.
going to be great, and so many people from across the sector, like not just from within academic teams, but also professional services teams as well. So I think it's going to be really interesting. I hope so anyway.
Yeah. So my last question is just, thinking about where we are and where higher education is going, what do you feel are some of the key considerations? Let's say we've got a team leader or a personal tutor lead, or even just someone who's just entered in academic advising, right? What are some of the key considerations to think about for the long term or for the future in terms of how that's positioned with the students on a degree program, within the institution?
A large part of it, I mean, so what I've been doing in the past year is reviewing our university's personal tutoring policies and practices to see what we're doing well and to see what can be improved. The majority of universities, I suspect, are like mine in that they're actually doing really good stuff, but
Mm.
it's not really linked up
Right.
together. And a really crucial issue is a lack of clear and common messaging about what the role is and what it isn't, both for staff and for students. So I think anyone who's involved in leadership roles, whether it's at the top level or local levels, I think the first thing you need to do is make sure that your staff and your students understand what this role is for, but more importantly, what it's not. We
Right.
can triage, but we're not therapists, we're not social workers, we can't do those sorts of things. We can signpost, but that's it. So it's thinking about expectations for students and staff within the role. The second thing, I guess, to think about is training. So, what training are you giving your staff to do this role properly? And that's why thinking about it as a branch of pedagogy is really important because all the skills that make you a good teacher, clear communication, empathy, time management, all these sorts of things. These are also the skills of the personal tutor. They're not separate. People think that either you're a good personal tutor or you're not. You're a nice person or you're not. No, these are skills. I mean, you are a nice person or you're not, but you can learn to be a nicer person, I think, through active listening or other
Yeah.
kinds of skills that we expect our teachers to do. And then I guess the other thing to really think about is a bit more of a critical aspect is what are we actually asking our staff to do in terms of their burden. And that's a really crucial issue for
Right.
leadership. The good practice, I think, within the sector is recognize that anything more than 30 personal tutees for one member of staff becomes unmanageable. How can you track the complex lives of 30 individuals when they've got so many things going on? And that is going to be a big problem around resourcing. How are you going to make sure that your teams are resourced and that they're getting proper time to do this properly? And this also feeds into other issues. If you haven't got enough staff to do your personal tutoring properly, you haven't got enough staff to do lots of other things properly too. And I
Yeah.
know that there's a squeeze on resources across the sector. But if people are really serious about personalized learning and about student success, then we're just going to have to resource our staff better in terms of numbers, but also in terms of training. So I think there's a lot going on, and that's where something like UKAT comes in to help, to give you the professional expertise and that community of practitioners that you
Mm.
don't feel like it's just you and your university suffering on your own. I mean,
100.
looking back on your career, what do you think you would have needed, like when you started becoming an advisor? What do you think would have been better for
Yeah,
you?
I definitely, I mean, I did the fellowship with then Higher Education Academy, and I think that was extremely useful. I think anything around continuing professional development, but more so in this area, I mean, I'm going to stress this when I do come to the conference and deliver my talk, but, lots of conversations about degree awarding gaps and
Mhm.
so forth. I genuinely don't think we can see the elimination of the awarding gap without inclusive advising. I
Absolutely.
don't think it's possible. Yes, we can make tweaks to the curriculum and the rest of it, but every learner needs a touch point with another human being
Yeah,
who is giving certain key messages to them that takes into consideration their difference.
yeah,
And I think that's hugely vital for what we're trying to do. So, I mean, my big thing is going to be telling everyone, look, you need to be thinking about inclusive advising. It should be a mainstay, and to do it to have the professionalism. Because I think my journey's been, like I said before, was like I had to do mental health first training, and then I realized, oh, I need to do safeguarding, and I realized I need to, and these were all, if I'll be honest, off my own back. Like
yeah.
I thought these things out, and I think if there was more a pathway, a kind of pathway of development, and said, actually, these are the things that need to be considered to complete that pursuit. I think that's amazing. And like you said, there's a separation. I think there's some people that want to engage more in the personal tutor side of their role. Some people that want to engage maybe more with the research or the teaching. And actually, should we be forcing round holes and square pegs? Or should we start to think, okay, what's the baseline that we
Mm.
need? And then allow people to take their own pathways of development and offer them more and more as they develop. So yeah, I think it's an amazing opportunity. I'm really looking forward to the conference. Everyone that's listening, please do come down. And if you are coming down, just ping me a note on LinkedIn or grab a drink and say hi. But Michael, I want to say thank you so much
No,
for
thank you for having me, Nathan. It was
coming
really
on.
great to chat about this. It's great. And it's great to hear about your experience too, because, and your work in particular around inclusivity is going to be, that's going to be the thing that makes or break this, I think, in the next
Mm,
few years.
yeah.
Like, but yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Welcome. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening to this episode. Like I said, sign up to the newsletter. We'll keep you updated with all the new episodes that will be coming out. Thank you all. All right. Bye-bye.